Madhur Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine Vishnu Padaya Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatade Sadarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatade Sadarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivraj Acharya Sotra Satashishi Shima His Divine Grace Shri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Navacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamkul Radhakul Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Janakpuri Dham Ki Mayapur Ramdev Dham Ki Gangavai Ki Puri Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulsi Maharani Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki
Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Shri Radhe. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Goranitai, 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 Jaya Goranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Pramanande, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki. Hare Krishna. Om Jnanatimandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasme Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. And Hare Krishna to everyone that is watching this online. A warm welcome. Please do feel free that if there's anything that inspires you or anything that kind of really draws you in, just share it. It's always nice because others can also be inspired and others can always take something from it. Even though I don't know if I am going to say something useful, but nevertheless, thank you so much for this opportunity given to me to be able to be here to share some reflections, some thoughts, and some meditations. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 11, which is called Karma Yoga. The section is called Karma Yoga. So I'm going to read it in Sanskrit and then the transliteration and translation. For those that are watching online, please do feel free to repeat along with me. It's actually always interesting that the more we engage in classes, the more we engage in sessions, the more that we actually are active, the more we can actually learn. And not just learn, then the question starts to come into thought. How is this relevant to me? What can I do? How can I apply this in my life? Which is really where the nectar is. So yeah, just because you can't be here physically, it doesn't mean you are not with us. You are, just through a screen. All right, so Devan Bhavayata Nena Te Deva Bhavayantu Vaha Parasparam Bhavayantaha Shriya Paramavapsyata Devan Bhavayanta Nena Te Deva Bhavayantu Vaha Parasparam Bhavayanta Shriya Paramavapsyata Devan Bhavayanta Nena Te Deva Bhavayantu Vaha Parasparam Bhavayanta Shreya Paramavapsyata. Didn't read it. Devan Bhavayatnena Te Deva Bhavayantu Vaha Parasparam Bhavayanta Shreya Paramavapsyata. Transliteration. Devan, demigods. Bhavayanta, having pleased. Anena, by this sacrifice. Te, those. Deva, demigods. Bhavayantu, will please. Va, you. Parasparam, mutually. Bhavayantaha, pleasing one another. Shreya, benediction. Param, the supreme. Avapyastaha, you will achieve. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada Ki. The demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you. And thus by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. Purport. The demigods are empowered administrators of material affairs. The supply of air, light, water, and all other benediction for maintaining the body and soul of every living entity is entrusted to the demigods, who are innumerable assistants in different parts of the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their pleasures and displeasures are dependent on the performance of yajna by the human being. Some of the yagyas are meant to satisfy particular demigods, but even in so doing, Lord Vishnu is worshipped in all yagyas as the chief beneficiary. It is stated also in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna himself is the beneficiary of all kinds of yagyas. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. Therefore, ultimate satisfaction of the Yagyapati is the chief purpose of all yagyas. When these yagyas are perfectly performed, naturally the demigods in charge of the different departments of supplies are pleased, and there is no scarcity in the supply of natural products. Performance of yagyas has many side benefits, ultimately leading to liberation from material bondage. By performance of yagyas, all activities become purified, as it is stated in the Vedas. Ahara, Shuddho, Sattva, Shuddhi, Sattva, Shuddho, Dhruva, Smriti, Lambi, Sava, Grantinam, Vipram, Moksha. By the performance of yagya, one's eatable becomes sanctified, and by eating sanctified foodstuffs, one's very existence becomes purified. By the purification of existence, finer tissues in the memory become sanctified, and when memory is sanctified, one can think of the path of liberation, and all these combined together leads to Krishna consciousness, the great necessity of present-day society. Srila Prabhupada ki. So once again, thank you all so much for having me. Honestly, being in a temple room and giving a class, I don't really feel qualified, but nevertheless, I will do my best, and ultimately it's through the mercy of the Vaishnavas and the mercy of the Lord, so that I can speak of something useful and something relevant to our lives. Bhagavad Gita always has advices, it always has something that is relevant to our lives, so it's really interesting. So I just want to break it up, because usually it's difficult to have a long duration of attention without really necessarily knowing where this discussion is going. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to break this discussion into three. The first one really is the importance of acquiring knowledge, and from whom or where we should get our knowledge from. How do we actually get that knowledge? Then the second part is that once we get that knowledge, now how can we utilize it really to direct our yagyas, to direct our worship towards the Supreme Lord? And then I guess for the third part, I'll leave it for question. Okay. So nowadays I was listening to a lecture by Prabhupada on this particular verse. And what he was mentioning is that in modern day society, we live in a world where people think that nature is the creation of everything. So he described it as a godless society. And one thing that comes to mind, just bear with me. So he described this modern day civilization as a godless society where people naturally think that nature is the creation of everything, nature is the source of everything. I was given a Gita Live class a few weeks ago, and one thing that we were mentioning is about the Big Bang Theory, how there practically is people in the world that think that two rocks have collided together, and as a result of it created an explosion and created the rain, the water, the fire, and everything in between. So, and one thing that comes into mind personally is also this idea, this philosophy that is ongoing nowadays in the world, the law of attraction. People in the world nowadays think that if I sit and I just meditate on something in particular that I desire, that somehow it will manifest. And as a result of it, many people become deluded by such practice, by such philosophy. They think that, yes, I am the creator. Yes, God doesn't exist. I am God. So it's a very dangerous mentality, and it's something that, especially within the young generation, people do practice, and people do believe in this ideology, this philosophy of that if I meditate on something, if I think about it, somehow my vibration, my energy will match with that vibration and energy, and somehow I will attain what it is that I want. But even such things like the law of attraction, such things as nature, Prabhupada was mentioning how everything has a source. And one interesting pastime that comes to mind is actually Newton once, when his friends in the classroom, they saw this amazing model that was designed. And it was basically a small model of the whole universe. And then Newton's friends were astonished. They were like, this is amazing. Who created this? And then Newton came and he was like, nobody created it. It just created itself. And Newton's friends were like, oh, don't be daft. You know, someone must have created it. Like, who created it? And Newton was like, no, nobody created it. It created itself. So, okay, and then he was like, okay, I created it. It just appeared, yeah. Yeah, so it just appeared. And then after that, eventually he told them, okay, you know, it was created. And so really the moral of that whole scene, that whole pastime is that people find it so easy to believe something as small as, like, usually I give the example of a phone. You know, if I just tell you this phone has self-manifested itself, it's not possible. Someone must have designed it. Someone must have created it. So when it comes to small things, people actually have logic. But when it comes to the whole universe, the galaxy, and everything in between, then somehow people have this mentality that it just created itself, that nobody's created it. So this is what the point that Newton was really trying to explain. Now I can give another analogy. You know, and then I'll move on to what it is that I'm really trying to say. Another analogy is electricity. Electricity is a natural power. But even though it's a natural power, like for instance, like right now the lights are on, for those that are watching this online, the computer is on or the TV is on, so it's a natural power. But nevertheless, that natural power must have come from somewhere in order to come to your house or to come to the temple, which is basically a powerhouse. And in that powerhouse, someone is managing everything. Otherwise, it's that how can electricity just come and appear out of nowhere? It's not possible. So the point is that even though we are surrounded by so much resources, so much things around us, whether it be electricity, whether it be water, whether it be air, yes, it is there, but there's a controller behind it. It hasn't just come into existence. It hasn't just come by itself. And ultimately, yes, Krishna, but other than Krishna is the demigods. Different demigods are facilitating for different requirements that we have. Now here's a question. People may necessarily think it's like, okay, I'm listening to this, it sounds amazing. But how do I know demigods exist? How do I know that Krishna exists? How do I know that all of this is real? And so then such people, then they say, and then Prabhupada mentions it many times, and even in Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, we see this, that I'll believe in God when I see God. I'll believe in demigods when I see demigods. But Prabhupada actually mentioned like something really interesting, is that a child, if his father is missing, he can't just go and look for their father by himself. He has to ask the mother. He has to find the source from the mother. And so same in our situation is that we can't just find God by ourselves. We can't just find demigods by ourselves. That somehow what it is that in order to find the Supreme Father, the Eternal Father, we have to go to the mother. And what is the mother in this situation? Shastra. Is that through actually reading, through discussions, through talking to one another, what it is that over time we can develop that spiritual vision, that spiritual understanding. You can't understand spiritual matter with material matter alone, because our senses are so restricted, our senses are so limited, that even like a great pastime it reminds me of is Hanuman. When Hanuman was looking for Sri Ram, he was looking for Ram, and he was like, where's Ram, where's Ram, where's Ram? And then this sage came to him and said to him, okay, you pay attention, there are going to be, Ram is going to come, but pay careful attention, otherwise you may miss him. And then as soon as Ram came in the form of a boy, Hanuman was just so focused on a particular look that he just missed the opportunity. And this is how it is in spiritual life, is that we have certain expectation. It's that, Sutta Prabhu always mentions, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And so because we're so contaminated in our current condition, because we are so deluded in our current condition, it's just difficult to grasp spiritual wisdom. Spiritual wisdom happens through first purification, through cleansing, through service, through submissiveness. And over time, when we can do this more and more and more, our fog of delusion can be cleared away and we can see things as they are. And so, how is this possible? Sorry, just bear with me. How is this possible? So, there's 3 ways of acquiring knowledge. I'm sure we know this. There's 3 ways of acquiring knowledge. And so the first one is pratyaksha. I hope I said that right. But yeah, so what it is that so many people try to understand spiritual matter through only their personal experience. But personal experience is restrictive. Personal experience means that something I must have either heard in the past or something that I must have seen in the past or something I've read or something that I've watched. And somehow now I'm trying to correlate what it is that I've experienced in the past with what it is right before me. So if we try and use our own, when you actually read Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll understand what I mean. Is that you can get lost in a world and you can just think, it's like, how is this all possible? So personal experience is restrictive. It doesn't allow us to see the full scope. And so therefore, oftentimes I always mention, then it's what happens is that we're so too busily focused on the stones that we just miss the gems of the Bhagavatam, of the Bhagavad Gita, the lessons, the morals, the ethics. Because what it is that we are taking things out of context based on our own personal experience. And so that's why Prabhupada always mentions, and if you read the intro, don't try and just study this alone. Try and study it with someone that is more advanced. Scrutinize it. Don't just come to one conclusion, because there's layers, just like there is in Bhagavatam, there's layers and layers and layers of understanding even in Bhagavad Gita. So read it in the association of devotees, scrutinize it, and don't try and have an agenda. Because if you do have an agenda, then again, you'll just miss the point. So this is the first kind of knowledge, when we try to understand spiritual matter with our own personal experience, which is third-class knowledge. And this is how oftentimes people come so close to the truth, yet they're so far from the truth. The second is logic, anuman. A good example that is given once is that, let's say you're watching your favorite football match, and then a particular team that you support wins. Then what you try and do is you try and use logic, rationalism, and all these kind of things to try and predict what is to come. But again, that's restricted. It doesn't make sense. There's no logic to that. It's like you can predict it, but you're not sure. You don't know if it's going to happen for sure. So what it is again, we can't, because again, with logic and reasoning, it comes down to some degree of our own personal experience also. And that in itself is also restricted, which is second-class knowledge. Now, the first-class knowledge is the one that ideally we should be aspiring for. The first-class knowledge, and again, it's mentioned that there's descending knowledge and ascending knowledge. And the thing with Krishna consciousness, the thing with spirituality is that sometimes we allow pride to get in the way of really understanding this amazing and precious philosophy that we have. This philosophy that can transform our life. We try and come to our own understanding. We try and go upwards, just like Ravana built ladders and he tried to kind of, go to the kingdom of God. So what it is, but that's not possible. Somehow what it is that we need the mercy. It goes down, up, not up, down. So therefore what it is that we need to hear from the right authority, from the right sources. And that's the most important thing, is that with sabda, with hearing from sources, it's not that we just hear transcendental matter from just about anyone or everyone. It's that somehow we need to acquire our knowledge from those that are bona fide, from those that are within the parampara. Otherwise, there's no benefit to, and there's many people like that, there's no benefit to just hearing transcendental knowledge from anyone. Because again, their consciousness can affect ours. So it's not just a matter of just hearing from anyone and everyone, but hearing from the right people, so that therefore they can guide us to Krishna. So that's the first class knowledge. So, and with that being mentioned, the next point I really want to kind of move on to is that, so let's get back to demigods. And oftentimes what it is that, right now we've been in lockdown for nearly a year. And oftentimes is that, when we think about our seniors, we think about how much they have actually done for us. and for Radha Gokulananda, for the temple, for the services, they've guided us so much, so many instructions, so many guidance. So they've done so much for us. We may not necessarily always see it, but they're always there, always serving, always facilitating, always providing. So now, if that's how much our senior devotees, temple presidents, and everyone else have done, now imagine how much the demigods are doing. Like, just imagine that. It's like they're practically taking care of every aspect of our life, whether we're blinking, whether we're breathing, walking, practically everything. So the responsibility of the demigods are so great. And if we were just to pause for a moment to try and express our gratitude, it wouldn't be possible. Because they're taking care of the universe, they're taking care of practically so much. And there's a particular verse that I want to mention. I should have put it the verse. But nevertheless, I'll just quote in English. The supply of air, light, water, and all other benedictions for maintaining the body and soul of every living entity is entrusted to the demigods, who are innumerable assistants in different parts of the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the thing is that with Krishna consciousness, if we actually look at the Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 section is all about karma yoga. The second section is about bhakti yoga, and the last 6 section is about yoga of wisdom, jnana yoga. And so what it is that we read through the first, we need to know how to function. And when we need to know how to function, then Krishna actually gives us the intelligence. But whether knowing how to function and Krishna giving us the knowledge, all this should culminate into love. Loving Krishna, coming closer to Krishna. But more importantly, through love, an expression of appreciation. Appreciation to Krishna for providing everything that he is. Now also appreciation to the demigods. But like I've actually said, trying to express that appreciation to the demigods through yajna, practically in our conditional state, is difficult. And then there's another verse that says that, and this is from 3:11, the demigod's pleasure and displeasure are dependent on the performance of yajna by the human beings. And so one thing that Prabhupada was saying was that it is very difficult to satisfy all the demigods differently. It is very, very difficult. And so therefore what he kind of concluded was that instead, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually has provided the greatest yajna there is, the greatest benediction, which is to chant the holy name of the Lord. And what I want to do is I just want to kind of refer to one conversation that Prabhupada was having with a devotee. So a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada that many people say that because we have quit college or a job to become Krishna consciousness, we are irresponsible. And Prabhupada said, we are not irresponsible, but we are in such a position that we have passed all material responsibilities. This is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 5, Verse 41. One who has fully surrendered to Krishna no longer has any responsibility to demigods, great sages, relatives, society, anyone. As long as you are not Krishna conscious, you have a responsibility to all these persons. But one who has taken to Krishna consciousness without any reservation, he has no material duties, no material responsibility. This is the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam. Our only responsibility is to serve Krishna. And then the devotee says, so Srila Prabhupada, when you told a guest last night that she should give up her responsibility, Srila Prabhupada says, and take to Krishna consciousness, not that you give up all responsibilities and do nothing. And that's so important. Krishna consciousness doesn't mean that it's not a form of escapism. It's not that we actually escape from our responsibilities and our duties. Rather, we dovetail it for Krishna's pleasure. So whether it is that we're going to a particular work, we're taking care of children, or whether we're living as a brahmachari, whatever duties that we have, whatever responsibilities that we have, it's only for the pleasure of the Lord. It's only to serve Him. And this is what Prabhupada was really trying to emphasize. Not that you give up all responsibilities and do nothing first. Take to Krishna consciousness, give up something, take something, then it's all right. And that this is often the mistake that a lot of devotees make, is that when they come into Krishna consciousness, when they embrace the philosophy, they try and immediately become a mendicant. They try and give up and surrender everything, which is difficult, because what it is that we cannot maintain and sustain that level of intensity. As I've mentioned, you've got to find an intensity that matches with your personality, and then you'll blossom in spirituality. So somehow or another, what it is that you've got to acknowledge where you are and work towards the ideal. And this is what Prabhupada was trying to emphasize once more. Srila Prabhupada, when you speak of taking care of our responsibilities for Krishna, doesn't that also have a material aspect to it? For instance, in our movement, parents must also bring up their children, take care of them, train them to read and write, and so on. Srila Prabhupada says, yes, but why are we taking care of the children? Just to make them Krishna conscious. This is our responsibility in Krishna consciousness. We should think, here's my child, let me make him Krishna consciousness. This is why we are taking so much care to train our children in the Gurukulis, Krishna conscious schools. We are not irresponsible. And that's really what I wanted to point in this statement, is that it says that one who has fully surrendered to Krishna no longer has any responsibility to demigods, great sages, relatives, society, and anyone. And then it says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 7, verse 53, the only duty of the most merciful person is to transform the degraded taste of people. If you can save even one person from the fault of Mahamaya, then that will be a greater act of philanthropy than opening millions of hospitals. To preach Krishna consciousness is actually the greatest welfare activity. Indeed, it is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as para upakara, work for the true benefit of others. So this is what it is that actually through taking the practice of Krishna consciousness, through chanting, through absorbing our consciousness in Krishna consciousness, what it is that we are able to dovetail all of our activities for Krishna's pleasure, and more importantly than that we're actually performing the greatest welfare there is for humanity. Because right now humanity is in suffering. And Srila Prabhupada said that Krishna consciousness means to take the suffering of others, and not does it just end there. The next part of that is that we should then feel sympathy, we should feel empathy, we should be feeling inspired to try and want to help them, to do something about it. And chanting helps us to do that. They say that, teach a person, give a person a fish and he'll only be able to eat a day. Like, okay, we're vegetarians and vegans, but nevertheless, the moral is that give a person a fish and he'll only be able to be satisfied for a day. Now, teach a person how to fish, then they'll never starve for a day. So all these philanthropy work that individuals do, there's only so much help that we are providing. But through helping them to understand their true identity, the reason why they are here and where is that they're going, then what it is that you can give them the ultimate solution to all their suffering. You can give them the ultimate formula so that therefore they are able for themselves to dovetail all of their challenges, difficulties, their suffering for the pleasure of the Lord, to learn a lesson from it and to overcome their obstacles and ultimately to come closer to Krishna. And one thing that I was... And one thing in particular, and that's the thing, this is ultimately what even the demigods themselves want. Now go to a servant and pray, like for instance, you don't even have to go to a servant. Go to Sutapa Prabhu and try and praise him. What would he say? It's only through the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. Go to anyone and try and glorify them. Ultimately, they'll give that glorification, they'll pass it on to their Guru Maharaj or to their mentors or whomever. And so same with the demigods, is that would they really and truly personally like to be glorified when ultimately even their power comes from Krishna? Ultimately, whatever we ask from even the demigods, Krishna is the ultimate sanctioner. So he's the one who sanctions everything that we receive. So even therefore, naturally, what would please the demigods is to go directly to Krishna. But somehow, because we're going to them, they have to give us benedictions. I hope I said that right. Yeah. And then there's another quote. Narada Muni travels all over the universe for the sole purpose of performing the best welfare activity for the entire universe by teaching everyone how to become a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So like I said, this is what will please everyone, including the demigods. And then in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 16, it says that, O best amongst the Bharats, 4 kind of pious men begin to render the devotional service unto me. The distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for the knowledge of the Absolute. And now oftentimes we know and understand that some people, rather than going to Krishna, they go to a particular demigods because they have some material desires. And I remember Janakanath Prabhu once mentioned this really profound, and I actually found it even in Srimad Bhagavatam, how oftentimes we find people in spiritual life, they practice spiritual life because they have material desires. And once they actually acquire those material desires, they try and prolong it as long as possible. They try and enjoy it. And then as long as they can enjoy it ultimately they realize that they've become prisoners of their own sense enjoyment. And then they try and seek for liberation, which is ultimately what they wanted. Because every single soul, every single person, Radhanath Maharaj describes it as that everyone has the desire to love and be loved. Really, the force behind all of our activities and everything that we do is that we're seeking for pleasure. We're pleasure seekers. We're seeking to be loved. We're seeking to be appreciated. But what we don't recognize is actually that pleasure, that love that we are seeking for, we can actually ultimately acquire it through the service of the Lord. And that's the reality of it. Whether it's the distressed, whether it's the one that's looking for material benediction, whether it's the one that is inquisitive, that ultimately all of our activities, if we are sincere, will lead us to the understanding that really and truly I need Krishna in my life. Now, instead of going the long route, again, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has presented the fastest and easiest way to be able to do this, which is through Harinam, through chanting the holy name of the Lord. And then what I'm going to do is, lastly, I'm just going to touch on 2 things and then I'm done, which is basically, I was just reading, bear with me, I was just reading the Jiva Goswami Sri Tattva Sandarbha, and there was just something really nice I just want to quote from there, and then just quote one more last thing from Srimad Bhagavatam, just to really demonstrate the beauty and the power in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Sometimes it's like we're falling asleep, sometimes we're chanting, but nevertheless, this is the greatest welfare for humanity there is. And that oftentimes our chanting, we may not necessarily immediately see the benefit, but it's like a banyan tree. That over time, what it is that we are developing that ruchi, but it may not just necessarily be visible immediately. But then you'll realize, actually, let me take the japa away from you today. Let me take the bead away from you, and let's see how much you panic. It's happened to me many times where I think like, wow, why am I not developing taste? But as soon as I lose my japa bag and I lose my japa bead, suddenly it's like something feels like it's missing in my life. I start to panic. So we may not necessarily always realize that how much our life has transformed through chanting until we lose something. So basically, in this passage, what it was basically being mentioned was how the living entities who are entangled in material life, seeking out the illusion of wife, children, wealth, and so on. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pursued the deluded souls to attract them to the better life of Krishna consciousness. Both these interpretations are grammatically and logically feasible. So one thing that I really found that interesting, and I was sharing this with a friend of mine, is that it's interesting how actually, and I've always found this profound, especially coming from an Islamic practice, is that, in different religions, they teach you how God is there to punish you, if you don't listen to him. But here we're clearly seeing actually that even though people are trying to run away, they're trying to enjoy material life, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is none different from Krishna, is actually chasing them, trying to destroy the darkness that lurks within them by giving them the holy name. So people are trying to run away from God, and God is actually trying to save them. That's how I understood it. And that's really beautiful. That's amazing. And, like I've mentioned, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us the greatest yagya there is. He's given us the greatest opportunity to come to him, to understand him, and to embrace him in our life. But sometimes what it is that, we live in a world where complexity has become our new simplicity. And simplicity has been thrown out the window. So somehow or another, if we can simplify our life more, if we can simplify our practice more, if we can just simplify ourselves more, then we actually can realize that the value of chanting, the value of directing our worship ultimately to the Supreme Lord through serving his devotees, we can realize the value of all this. Otherwise, as Sutta Prabhu has mentioned, we may just miss the point of spiritual life. We may miss the point of chanting. We may miss the point of Krishna consciousness. Then what's the point in doing everything that you're doing if you're missing the point? Hare Krishna. Thank you all so much. Yeah.
You mentioned that you can't see spiritual things that materialize, and you gave the example of Ram and seeing materialize, trying to see Ram, Hanuman trying to see Ram. Is there an example you can give where materially, like that example you gave for people, religious people, spiritual people, already know Ram and Hanuman? How could you give this example to an atheist or non-devotee? How could you give a similar example of how you can't see anything spiritual materialize? Any examples?
Hearing is important. I think there's a really nice quote that says, I am not who I think I am not who you think I am who I think you think I am. So what it is that oftentimes spiritual understanding becomes so difficult because of what we are actually reading, what we are actually listening to, what we are actually absorbed in. I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but I'm going to carry on. It becomes difficult because what it is that, society teaches us superficiality, artificiality, and with that artificiality, that desire for instantly to receive things and to understand things, somehow what it is, again, like I've mentioned, is that we miss the point. So I think what it is just to answer your question, how we can spiritually understand things, it really comes down to being conscious. Actually, Radhika Ranja Prabhu was mentioning this, that it all starts from being conscious. And that consciousness then can allow us to better our question, to better our understanding. That's why in, living in an ashram and even outside of ashram is so emphasized to actually adhere to the 4 regulative principle, because this helps us to some degree take responsibility and to be conscious of our activities, to be conscious of, and even the consequences if we break those activities. So it really starts from eating consciously. When you're speaking, when your interactions with other people, being conscious of that, being conscious of when we're reading, whatever it is that we're doing, being absorbed in that. Because then what it is that we can develop the capacity to think more and to question things. And the more our quality of question improves, and then therefore our vision improves. So it's really about reading, hearing, and actually, what was her name? Chintamani, what was her surname? Chintamani Dharma, Devi Dasi Mataji. Yeah, she mentioned that it really and truly all comes from hearing, when you can hear. So that's a question for all of us, even a question for me, is that how often do we actually listen? This process is so amazing that, even if we don't get it completely, by just hearing and by being sincere in our hearing, over time, it will actually rub onto us. That's how amazing it is. That somehow what it is that you endeavor and the mercy comes from the Lord. That somehow you just try and hear. You don't have to understand everything. You try and hear, and you try and share what you hear. And even if you don't fully grasp it, over time, Krishna delivers his mercy. And over time, you get deeper and deeper understanding. And that's another very important point. Spirituality is not linear. It's circular. What it is that, okay, we may be repeating the same thing, we may be hearing the same thing, but what is the quality of your depth? Is that every single day when you hear the same thing, you're just thinking like, oh, I'm just hearing the same thing again, I want to hear something fresh. Because that's the superficiality and artificiality of society, that we always want to hear something different. But what spiritual life or Krishna consciousness is trying to teach you is that you don't need to hear anything different. You hear the same thing, you try and meditate on it, you try and apply it. And over time, that circular becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. And so does your realization. And so does your understanding. And then you see things as it is, not as you are. So I hope that kind of answered your question. Thank you so much. All right, I think I'll call it a wrap from there. Thank you all so much. For those that are also watching online, please, I may not be able to see, but I'll go online later on. If you do have any question, just share it also in the comment section. Otherwise, thank you all so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Nitai Gaura Pramanande.